Welcome to this Synology Partner Online Training. I'm Jeremy from the UK Business Development Team. Today's webinar is around the Active Backup suite of applications and, well, how it can benefit your business to protect the data and the infrastructure that you have. Overview for the webinar, we're going to start by talking about market trends and why Synology have developed the Active Backup suite. We'll talk about an important concept, is that of a backup appliance and how you can use your Synology NAS for that. And obviously we'll be showing you the features, the capabilities of Active Backup, the technologies our engineers are using to deliver it, and obviously there'll be some demos. As we mentioned in the last webinar, there are lots of backup applications. We focused a bit more on snapshot replication in the previous one, and here we'll be looking into the Active Backup suite. We'll actually divide it into two webinars to avoid cramming too much information into a single session. We'll start by Active Backup for Business today, and in the second one we'll look a bit more into the cloud offerings. So first trend, data is scattered across storage platforms, and it's interesting to see what changes there have been over the past 2 years. There's been a move towards virtualization and the cloud, especially for SMB in the case of the latter. Now, we're not expecting a physical or an internalized approach to completely disappear. What we're expecting is actually to see a bit more of a balanced approach. And obviously that has two important consequences. First, well, you already know this, there's a very strong growth in data that businesses need to handle. But more interestingly, and a lot of people overlook this, because we're seeing these three approaches all gaining in popularity, what it means that on average an IT admin needs 4.1 backup solutions to make sure that all the data, all the infrastructures of his business are well protected. Now, that is not ideal because it means more complexity, it means more solutions, therefore a higher learning curve for the IT staff. I think you can see what Synology are trying to achieve. What we want to do is push an integrated solution to allow you to make the right decisions and reduce the complexity and allow you to be more efficient in the data protection of your business. So just to recap what Active Backup is trying to achieve, whether it's PCs, workstations that your employees are using, the servers that you have, your virtual machines or select cloud services, what we want to do is allow you to, using a Synology NAS, protect all of these. And we have three applications in the Active Backup suite allowing you to do this. So what are the key aspects of Active Backup? I've already mentioned protecting all of these different workloads. When we actually launched Active Backup 2 years ago, it was an agentless approach. In recent months, we've added the agent, and that brings a lot of new capabilities, notably allowing you to do not just the protection of data, but getting system configurations and a full image backup and restoring it. Self-service recovery for employees through a portal, we'll be showing you that in a few minutes, and also templates for IT admins. And that really speeds up large-scale deployments. Finally, Active Backup brings global deduplication to the Synology platform. One thing to note, BTRFS, the file system that we introduced in the last webinar, is required for this. So Synology as a backup appliance. Why would you want to do this? What are the key highlights? Well, first, it's a one-stop solution. We obviously provide hardware. You'll be able to have the software also provided by Synology, and that really reduces the complexity of your approach. Low total cost of ownership, that's something that NAS devices in general have always been commended for, notably in terms of power consumption. Synology have always done a great job of providing easy to use software, meaning that especially for SMBs, you don't need to have a dedicated IT team to allow you to run this, therefore reducing your costs. And obviously with Active Backup, what we're doing is not just providing software by the same manufacturer, but it's completely free of charge. So only hardware cost involved, no licensing. And obviously we've got a lot of experience in storage and backup, so you can benefit from these existing capabilities. You don't need to buy additional software for this. So we've talked about snapshot replication and BTRFS in the previous webinar, but there's obviously other aspects such as a VPN server that you can run and install on the Synology free of charge. I've already mentioned this. We're actually going to break up this into two webinars. We'll talk about virtualization for VMware environments and for Office 365 and G Suite in the second webinar. In this one, we'll be focusing on, well, the backup and protection of physical devices, whether workstations or servers. Three important aspects to consider when you want to, well, choose some backup software. Obviously, it's the deployment. It's essential that it's simple and efficient for the IT admin. The restoration of data. It's all good and well to have the data physically present on the Synology. What you want to make sure is that it's easily accessible, and especially in the cases of disaster recovery, that it's going to be done fast and efficiently. And we'll also be talking about the technologies we use to deliver this. So, what's the idea of these templates? I'm going to demo that in a few minutes, but the idea is that in any business, especially with large number of employees, groups of employees, different teams will have common settings. And when you set up a backup task, well, anything that's repetitive, you want to try and automate this. That's what the template is going to allow you to do. Let's just contrast a management team and designers. Management teams often don't have that much data. It's smaller files, but they do very frequent edits that might be very important. So you want to try and get every single version. So you'll have a higher schedule for the backup, a high frequency for the backup, and you want a very fine retention policy. Designers will in a way be the opposite. You've got large files, especially for when it's video editing. You don't really need the work in progress, so you'll want to have a lower frequency, maybe daily or weekly, and you don't need the same retention policy. And that obviously means that you won't be using up storage unnecessarily on your Synology NAS. Without further ado, we're going to run a few demos, taking a look at the installation on the server side and also on the workstation. So the idea of this agent, and we'll also take a look at creating templates. So we don't usually go through the installation to not waste time, but here we're actually going to go through the entire process just because it can be a bit more confusing than with some other apps. This is our server for today, finishing in 1.35. We've called it Backup Appliance. Let's head straight to the package center. Well, no need to filter anything out. You can see the active backups are right at the top. So there's for Office 365 G Suite, today we're focusing on the first one, Active Backup for Business. It's actually already installed. We just need to run it. Just takes a few seconds. You can see on the right hand side, this is what the interface looks like. The package center gives you a bit of a preview. And now that it's running, let's open it. Before you can actually get to the interface, you just need to do a short activation. And that's done with your Synology account. There's no licensing to purchase. It's completely free. You just need to go through this activation. I've already read the privacy statement, but I encourage you to do so. Once you've done that, click Next. Enter your Synology account. So this is the one we're using here today. Just enter the password, then you'll click Activate, and just a few seconds later, you'll be able to use Active Backup for Business. And this will be the same for the cloud versions. So this is what the interface looks like. This is obviously for admins. Okay, an overview shows you which devices are being protected. There's a calendar of your backup tasks. We're obviously going to be adding devices in the next few minutes and showing you what this is going to look like. The devices that you can protect: PCs, physical servers, file servers, virtual machines. And obviously some interesting settings that we'll be taking a look at. Now, I also want to just show you, if you go to the app list, when you install, it actually installs two packages. Active Backup for Business, this is the admin portal if you want, but there's also a restoration portal, and that one is more for end users, for your employees to not have to contact you every single time they need to get access to a file or to a folder. So this is for the first part of the installation, actually getting Active Backup on the Synology server. Second part is going to be what you have to do on the actual workstation on your actual Windows PC. So to do that, simply go to the Synology website and go to the download center. We'll do that in just a few seconds. Synology.com. Under support, that's the third tab, you can see download center. Make sure that you select the right Synology model so that you can actually see active backup. It's not available on all of them. Today we're using a FlashStation 1018. Make sure you're under all downloads and under the utilities tab, not packages. Utilities is everything around the workstation, around your PC. Packages are for the server. You can actually see there's a few different tools, the media creator and the recovery wizard. We'll take a look at that in a second session. Let's install the 64-bit version. Just a few seconds to download it. What we're going to do is open it in the folder and carry on with the installation. So this isn't something very difficult. It takes only a few seconds, but I just wanted to really highlight it for someone who might not have a NAS that runs active backup, so they can actually see that there's actually two aspects. Now the recording software hasn't taken this part. It's basically a window that allows you access, allowing the system to install active backup. But again, it's a very simple process. And now you actually will have the agent installed on your Windows PC. Let's take a look at what the interface looks like. It's actually really simple. You have a field for the server address, whether it's the IP or the host name, and then for your user credentials. So this is looking good. We're going to create a task in a few seconds. However, before we actually link the agent to create the backup task, I just want to show you, well, what as an IT admin you would do, which is create a template. And something very important that I want to highlight here is that the creation of the task is actually something done by the IT admin. It's really important when you're setting up active backup that you have control over that, notably the frequency, the retention policies. This is not something that is determined by the actual end user. And that means that you have complete control over the system, and you can make sure that your employees are actually keeping their data on their workstations well backed up. So before we link anything, we're going to return to the server interface in so the DSM. Sorry. And for that we're going to the active backup for business package, not the portal. So you have PCs, physical servers. We can make sure nothing has been linked already. We'll see how that changes after we've finished the setup. Settings. Actually, if you have a large number of devices, you can control the number of concurrent devices which will be backed up. Goes from 1 to 10, so that's a neat setting. And let's move on to the second tab, which is the templates. So you can see one is created by default when you install active backup. You can see the type, its name, which devices it's going to create when it adds them, and obviously a description. It tells you if it's a bare metal or a system backup. It tells you about compression, encryption, and things such as the frequency and when it's going to kick in. So let's create our own. We're going to create one for designers to follow up on the example I gave earlier. What is it going to apply to? So here are the user accounts. If you've already created a group, for instance for designers, you can apply it to that for simplicity. For today's demo, I'm just going to apply it to my account, which is Jeremy. You can choose between PCs or physical servers. We'll see later on that there's a difference between the capabilities that you can do for each. Now you have multiple shared folders that you might have created. Here I've only got one, but it's essential that you choose which one you want to have the backup task feed into. That has an impact on global deduplication because it's done at the shared folder level. Also note that it needs to be based on the BTRFS file system for the for the volume that the shared folder is nested on. So nothing to choose for here on my NAS, there's only a single one. The next step asks me to choose between bare metal and system volume. Bare metal means that you have system configurations, ideal for a full image of your system. Moving on, as often with our backup applications, you have a complete control over the schedule. So in the case of a designer, we probably don't want this to be done too frequently. We'll actually do it on Mondays and on Thursdays. Sorry, clicked it a little bit too fast. Let's go back and reduce it from hourly to daily. So that means that we'll get a daily version on Mondays and on Thursdays. You can also choose when it actually starts. Excellent. So now for the retention policy. This is very similar to what we did in the last webinar with snapshot replication. You can choose to keep all versions, or you can customize the rules that you want. And again, you have complete control over that. Okay, so you have all this listed here. Today, we're just going to keep things simple and keep all versions. I believe we should have one last step, which is just a recap of your template. And so let's click apply. It has now been created, and the next step is to actually test what this template is going to do. So we're going to start by linking our agent to the server. Actually, this is not what you want to do with the first field. The first field is actually the IP address. We're using a local IP today. You could also use an external IP or a host name. Second is the user account. So as we said, we're using Jeremy. Let's just enter this password and connect. Just a few seconds. Again, it gives you a recap. You can see that the template for designers has been applied. You can check it's a bare metal backup, and you have a recap if you just scroll down. You can see the backup type. So by default it's a PC, but if you actually wanted to change that to physical server, just click on it, enter your username and password, and you can modify that. Okay, you can see on the lower right hand side the tool icon. Just right click on it and you can get more information. You can see that the backup is idle, so we haven't actually triggered it. For that, you will actually need to go back to the admin panel. There you can see that the sales team machine has been added. You can see its IP address, a few options to restore. We'll take a look at them later. And under the task list, well, the task has been created. All you need to do is actually trigger it, because you can see no data's been captured yet. Now, obviously, the first backup takes a bit of time. You'll actually be able to monitor the progress under the status column. You might be curious, so how long does it take? What I've done for this first backup is I've actually backed up one of our PCs at work. It's a 1 terabyte drive, used at roughly 10 to 15%, and that took 11 to 12 minutes to complete. And then the subsequent backups were all incremental. We added a few files, we deleted a few, and that was just a matter of seconds. Obviously, if you threw a lot of, a few 100 gigabytes onto the storage, well, that would take a bit longer. But the key thing is that it's incremental, so it will be as fast and efficient as possible. So this is really for the deployment. Now what we're going to take a look at is, both from the perspective of an IT admin and of an employee, how do you get access to that data and how do you restore it as fast and efficiently as possible? So we'll introduce the concept of the portal. That's essential for the employees to be able to access their files and access their folders and restore them. We'll also take a look at how Active Backup ties in with a virtual machine manager, and that is essential to access data which is not in a file or folder form, but rather through applications, or think of databases. The technologies that we use for this, well, what I've just mentioned, Virtual Machine Manager, that relies on physical to virtual, or P2V. So what is the idea? You have your Windows device, Active Backup is getting versions, and the images are being stored on the Synology. Imagine your Windows PC goes down. Before, maybe you'll take a bit of time to be able to fix it, to get a new one in. What you can do is use the Synology as a hypervisor and power on that image in Virtual Machine Manager and carry on working. Another application is typically using as a test environment to maybe try Windows Update before you apply it in production. To make sure that everything is very efficient, we leverage changed block tracking, notably from Windows VSS. So obviously the first backup is complete, all the data goes through your network, but any subsequent version will only grab the changed blocks. And so the key aspect is that it's incremental at the block level, so very efficient. And if you compare it with Synology Drive or Cloud Station Backup, because this is image based, it's even more efficient than when it's just at the file level. Global deduplication. So change block tracking obviously has a big impact of reducing the amount of data going through the network. What we also do, and with a similar idea, is making sure that when we receive this on the actual storage level, we're not keeping multiple duplicated blocks. So if we find any blocks which are common to different backup tasks from different devices, what we will do is we'll delete the redundant ones and only keep a single instance. And that means that the storage used on your Synology is used very, very efficiently. In the latest versions of Active Backup, our engineers have actually added a storage tab, which actually shows you exactly how the global deduplication is being effective. So you'll be able to see the global deduplication ratio with a device count, and it'll also show you how much storage is being used, and you can contrast that with the total amount that you had on the original devices. So it's time for another series of demos. What are we going to do? Well, we're focusing on restoring data. First, I just want to show you where the image files of the devices you're protecting are physically on the Synology. Then we'll take a look at this self-recovery portal, and then we'll take a look at opening in Virtual Machine Manager, typically for disaster recovery scenarios. So back to our backup appliance. Let's open Active Backup for Business. You can see I've added a few more devices. Let me pause this right here for a second. So 2 PCs, a physical server, and also you can see that some backup tasks have been created. You can see when there has been one or many. And here everything's great, everything is green, means no problems. However, if there had been any errors, anything that needs your investigation, it all appears either orange or red. You just click on it, it takes you to the log and allows you to investigate. Moving on, so we'll take a look at the PC tab. You can see I've added actually a second machine to be protected. Again, it's laptop marketing. Under the task list, there is a task for each one of them. So I've actually triggered a few versions, not a single one. So you can see there's something like 11 or 12 of them, all are successful. If you actually want to see where these different images for each version are being stored, just click on that kind of hyperlink. It opens FileStation and actually takes you to the shared folder in question. And if you click on the folder for that specific version, you're able to see typically the size of the actual image. So key thing here is that we're not locking anything into a database. You can actually get access to it through the file system. If you go back to the device list, you have a few restore options in the portal, creating the recovery media, and a few more things you can do, notably update the agent, or if the option is enabled, upgrade the device. So now that we know where the data is physically on the Synology, it's not locked away from you. What we're going to do in a second session is actually, play around with the restoration portal. And here the idea of this portal is accessing files and folders and restoring them. Before we actually go to this portal, which opens in a web browser, we're going to stay in Windows File Explorer. You can see here on my desktop there's a folder called Research. So what I want to show you is what do I actually have there and what are the files that I'm looking to actually restore. You can see I've actually deleted quite a few. I've only got one. it's a spreadsheet of all our UK partners, but a few days ago there was actually something like 10 files here, a mix of spreadsheets, Word files, and an important PowerPoint presentation that I need for in a few days. So let's open this portal. If you go to the list of apps, you can open the portal directly. If you're just a non-admin user, that's what you'll be able to see. You can also get access to that from the admin panel if you have permissions. Let me just pause here for a second. On the left hand side you have a tree view, and as you click and open folders, you can actually see this update. So what we'll be doing a bit later is actually identifying that research folder which is on the desktop. Okay. You can see that we have a timeline at the bottom. We have a view role, logged in as admin, and a task list. If you click on this, you can see how many devices and tasks are being protected. We'll take a play around with that in a few seconds. You can see here how to navigate between different versions. So very easy to use, very easy to identify your data. Now the view role, this is quite important. It allows the admin to actually switch between different users and see exactly what they would be able to see. Let's try with Emma. We actually haven't backed up anything. We haven't created any tasks with her account where you can see she isn't able to see anything. If I actually switch to Jeremy's profile, let's do that in just a few seconds, where you can see I can actually get access to some data, and if you click on task, let's check that he only has access to that task that we created a bit earlier. Correct, the PC for the sales team. So key thing here is that permissions are respected. If you log in with an admin, with a user, you can only get access to his data, but obviously as an admin you can easily use that as a tool to switch and see what your different users will have access to and help them restore data if necessary. We're going to browse down, so using the different folders to identify this research folder and try and identify this Synology PowerPoint that I was trying to identify. So it's not here on the 5th. Let's take a look at the 3rd, still not there. And if we go a bit further back in time on the 29th of November, I can actually see the files update. I actually have 5 here, and the last one is the presentation that I need to restore. So how do I restore it? Just click on it and you will be able to see at the top 2 options become enabled: restore and download. What is the difference? Restore, well, sends it back to the original PC where it was actually backed up. Download means I can download it locally if I'm using a different machine. We're going to restore it in place. Let's click on that. Before you actually go ahead, you can actually choose to restore it so obviously to the same PC, but to a different folder, to a different location on the storage. That can be quite handy. You have that option there if you want to change the destination. We don't want to do that here. We'll put it back in place. You can see that little message, and let's see what has happened when I open the research folder. My PowerPoint is already there, and I'll now be able to access it. So that was for a single file. You might be wanting to do more than just that and restore an entire folder or an entire set of folders. Well, for that we're going back a level. We're clicking on research and on restore, and we're going to see what happens. Well, as you can see, it's gone really fast. All of the files from that specific point of time in November are now restored, and I'll now be able to access them. So I think this gives you a good idea of how our restoration portal works. Again, it's available for both admins and employees, meaning that every time they lose a file or they want to find a specific version, they won't be bothering your IT team. They really are self-sufficient and just can access the portal directly. So this was all file and folder based. But what happens if you actually need to get an entire system, not just data, but a system image, and you want to actually power it up in Virtual Machine Manager. So the idea behind that is either to do tests or use it as a disaster recovery solution. So this is what I'm going to illustrate in the next demo. And importantly, we'll be using our Virtual Machine Manager to actually power a PC that I'm going to be restoring. So let me give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing. Rather than actually backing up a separate physical PC, what I've done, I've created a smaller one, so a virtual one in our Virtual Machine Manager. Let me open this first. Just go to the app list. In Active Backup for Business, you can see we now have this physical server called Windows P2V, and this is the one that I'm hosting on Virtual Machine Manager right now. And the reason I've done that is to be able to create a smaller machine which will allow the disaster recovery to be faster for the purposes of this demo. So here's Virtual Machine Manager that transforms the Synology into a hypervisor. Windows P2V is actually currently running. You can see how much resources it's using on the host. You can actually launch it through VNC, so that means through the browser. You can see Active Backup is already running. We've set up the agent. We've already completed a task, and you can see it's feeding into the same server, ending in 1.35. There's actually a second one which is also running at the same time. What we're about to do is actually, well, simulate a disaster. We're going to force a shutdown of the two machines. And what we'll do, we'll use Active Backup to power up Windows P2V in a separate instance to perform a disaster recovery. So go to Restore. That's back in Active Backup for Business. You've selected your device. You can see the task list. You can see where all the various images are. You can see that for each one there is a version. Let's close that again. And let's go ahead with the restoration. So here, let me just pause for a second. There's a few different options. In the next webinar we do on Active Backup, we'll take a look at those first two, Instant Restore and Full VM Restore in VMware. Obviously, we're not tying you in only into our own hypervisor. If you have a VMware environment which is running, you'll be able to restore straight to them. However, that's for the second session, and we're taking a look at Instant Restore to Virtual Machine Manager. And that is obviously an exclusive feature that you have if you're using Synology Active Backup with our own hardware. Here are the different versions that I showed you a few seconds ago. We're going to choose, let's say, the one on 3rd of December. Let's click Next, and now it's going to start importing the virtual machine, so importing this image straight into VMM. If you've got multiple storage nodes created, you can choose the one you want. We only have one here. I'm going to choose to actually rename this VM to differentiate it. We're calling it Win Recovered. You can choose how many CPUs, how much memory you want to allocate to it. Choose an ISO file for boot up. The virtual disk, you can resize it before you actually create the instance. Again, similar settings on the network, options for auto start, BIOS, the keyboard layout. All that you have in Virtual Machine Manager is available when you create it from Active Backup. We're going to use a UK keyboard layout just for the sake of it. Click Next. Quite importantly, you can choose which users have access to this VM. Let's choose admin and my Jeremy account, and then a recap of all the settings that you have applied. And now we're going to go ahead and let's see what happens in Virtual Machine Manager. You can see the importation process. It's actually gone really fast. That's the reason I wanted to speed up the demo, to run it on a small virtual machine with a very small disk. And now what we're going to do is power it on and make sure that we have access to the same data that we had in the original Windows P2V. And that is obviously going to be allowing us to simulate a disaster recovery scenario. So it shouldn't take too long to power on. Okay, you can see the status has changed now to running. What I'm going to do is connect again through VNC. Obviously, you can also use that with the remote desktop protocol, which is integrated within Windows. Just for simplicity, we're going through the web browser today. Okay, the first time it takes just a few extra seconds to power on the machine. It's already done, and now we're just going to log in through our default user, and let's make sure that everything is ready for us to access our data and carry on working. Okay, here we are. We're logged in. Active Backup is there, and our work files, which were available in the original instance, are there for us to access. So that's exactly what we wanted to do. Again, I think we've given a good scenario, a disaster recovery scenario here. Obviously, as I've mentioned previously, you could also use this simply to power on an image and use it for maybe a test environment, for instance, applying Windows updates before you actually apply them in the original production environment. So I hope these demos have given you a good idea of what you can do, of what the capabilities around are around the agent. Now, it's important to note there is also an agentless version. We're not going to demo it, but I just want to kind of contrast it, and why would you go with the agent or the agentless over the other option. So what are the benefits of the agent? First, full system backup, data plus configurations. Note that with the agentless option, you are only getting data. That's because it's based on rsync and CIFS, and those are some limitations of those protocols. What are you going to apply that to? The agent to all Windows machines, so PCs and servers. The agentless version is really designed for servers only, but it's not just Windows, it's also Linux. The agentless brings important capabilities in terms of global deduplication, so to make your storage more efficient. The agentless is, well, because there's no agent, it's even more simple to set up. Basically, you just access the Synology Active Backup interface, and then you link everything from there. Now, because the agent is based on rsync and CIFS, you can't use it outside of a local network. That is because you can not resume tasks. It's not that you technically can't, but we don't recommend doing that, because if the task interrupts due to a bad internet connection, you'll have to do everything again from scratch. The agent doesn't have that limitation and gives you more flexibility on the locations of the devices that you need to protect. And at the end, obviously, disaster recovery solution, so that's powering on in VMware, that's brought to you via the agent. So key highlights of the agentless setup. One is based on CIFS or SMB, so one is for SMB servers, the other one for rsync servers. Obviously, as you know, Synology is in a way a Linux box. It's rsync compatible. You can actually back it up through that method. If you do so, don't forget to enable rsync on the device that you want to back up to and that you want to back up. So that is under the control panel, file services, rsync tab. Once you've completed the wizard, it's actually very simple. There is actually 3 different modes. One is multi-versioned, one is mirroring. It means that the data that you'll have on the source and on the destination will always be the same, so any deletions will apply on both sides. And incremental, so that means that deletions won't be taken out of the backup. We've nearly completed this webinar for today. I just want to give a kind of a recap on what we're achieving with the Active Backup Suite. First important highlight is that all the software is completely free. No licensing is involved. So if you're looking to use Active Backup, well, the hardware investment is the only investment you need to make. If you already own a Synology that runs Active Backup, you'll be able to do that without further investment. And Active Backup is there to really transform the Synology into a backup appliance, protecting all workloads that you have in your business, whether your employees' PCs, your infrastructure servers, virtual machines that you're using in VMware, and also select cloud services, namely Office 365 and G Suite. These last two aspects we'll be talking about more in detail in our next webinar. Obviously, the Synology is a backup appliance. You also want to have redundancy and data protection on that. That ties in with our high availability solution or snapshot replication, which we talked about in the last webinar. Now, I understand sometimes it can be a bit confusing which backup application on the Synology platform handles what. So this is just to give you a bit more of a more global view. You have the three different tiers. At the bottom, it's servers, virtual machines, workstations that your employees or your infrastructure are using. In the middle, that's the level of the Synology NAS, and at the top, that is cloud storage, whether used for editing or for backup and archiving purposes. So PCs, servers, virtual machines, you're using Active Backup, whether with an agent or not, but to get the data and the images stored safely onto the Synology. And Active Backup is running on the Synology system. If you're using Office 365 or G Suite, again, you can use that through Active Backup to, typically use the Synology as an archive mode. And the cloud service will only be there for editing of live files. Now, once you've got all that set up, that is really the Synology as a backup appliance. You want to make sure you're backing up to another server. So if it's another Synology, use snapshot replication. That is the ideal solution for businesses, notably. And you want to put the other units off-site. Now, if you're an SMB, you might not have another site to put the Synology on. You'll probably be tempted in using cloud services. There are third-party solutions that we interact with. Now, chances are, if you're using Active Backup, you want something that's all-in-one and all-integrated. So we actually have an offering for you. It's called Synology C2, and that allows you to protect, to back up folders on the Synology and have them replicated to our cloud. What operating systems are supported? So if you just go to our software specs on the website, you can see for the different categories, whether it's for Windows, servers, PCs, VMware, or the agentless solution, what are the requirements and what can be protected. What are the hardware requirements to run Synology Active Backup? Again, you have that on the website at the link we're indicating here, and you can see it's mostly, just to make it a simple, a good rule of thumb, it's the Intel models, notably because we require BTRFS to achieve the global deduplication. That's it for this webinar. We hope that will have proved useful to understand what Active Backup does, what it delivers to you, and as mentioned, we focused more on the physical devices, whether workstations or servers for today. We'll have a second session coming up very soon, and we'll talk more about protecting VMware environments, Office 365 and G Suite.